This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Great pleasure to have Mr. V Kamath with us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
What do you feel as we try and come full circle to what was the epicenter of the recession, Lehman Brothers? We come back 1 year later. How are things today?
Things are much more stable in a global context. Indeed, they have become stable over the last 1 year. I think in an Indian context, they were always stable. I think it was only fear that if there is instability, what happens? That drove maybe the Indian financial sector to some challenge about a year back. But in hindsight, these were unfounded because the Indian financial sector was always well capitalized and very conservative. So this shock was not going to impact us domestically.
Let me ask you from a global point of view, since you have familiarity with what's happening in the global finance world. The aftershock of Lehman over the last 12 months, do you think it's played out probably a lot better than what people were anticipating initially?
Indeed. I think aftershock of Lehman has got several components. It's not just a Lehman itself or the financial sector crisis itself. I think the aftershock has got a whole lot of other actors in it. The governments, other banks who do business with people who could be impacted, rating agencies, the accounting profession, and so on and so forth. I think it's the sum total of how these parties would act was what could determine the outcome. And I think there was at that point of time fear that all of these parties could not or may not act in an appropriate way or in a way that is going to resolve this issue, but could pull in different directions. I think on hindsight, all these constituents have acted in what could be considered as an appropriate way.
Just about 12 months ago, this question and this talk of a shift of access was extremely popular. Now that it's been a little more of a realistic assessment of how the West has reacted to it and how emerging markets like India and China are, do you truly feel that 1 year down the Lehman issue, we are now in a better position to say that the axis of financial power indeed is going to shift towards India and China?
It will shift. Both, I think, economic power and financial power will shift. But it will probably happen much slower than what we at this point in time comprehend, because I don't think that the Western economies will just collapse overnight. But the shift is very clear. And ultimately, the shift will be on what I call a competitive platform. If the West is not competitive, the East will rise. If the West manages to keep itself competitive, then it will take us that much longer to be competitive, whether it is a China or an India. And in the interim, we cannot rule out challenges in our own context. I think each of us, whether it's China or India, large populations. We have to manage change. We have to manage social pressures. And I think a misstep anywhere could put us back.
What about financial thinking of these two economies at this point? Do you think they're working in the right direction? I mean, we've seen what's been happening in China, and there's been a sudden, interest of the government to try and control a lot of foreign funds. But at the same time, when there was excess liquidity in the country, they started talking about mega investments into hedge funds and various other US securities.
See, I think that the challenge with China, and I believe most people who observe China probably think the same way as I do.
Tuba.com,